we'll get going. In the meantime, I'm just going to have a little bit of coffee. So we'll just wait just another 30 seconds or so, folks, and we'll just check whether we're on YouTube, and then we can get going. All right, we're all good to go. Okay, hi, I'm Sam from Simplicity. Thanks for joining. And we've got a bunch of people on, and then a bunch of people on YouTube as well. I'm going to have a chat to you for about half an hour, and then we're going to have lots of time for questions about anything that you want to have a chat about. And I thought I'd take you through a presentation that I've been doing around the country to certain audiences about the future, because there's an awful lot of bad news out there, and we're not going to gild the lily about the bad news that's out there, but there's also a lot of good stuff to look forward to and give you some really good examples of actually what's happening and what I think will happen, and this is my personal view, with New Zealand, in the sense that I think we're about to enter a period of renaissance and economic growth, and actually quite a prosperous time. So I wanted to leave you with some good news. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a presentation with you right now and talk to you through that presentation. But I just did want to say one thing just to start off with. Boy, has the last 3 months confirmed to us about what we always say about stick with your long-term plan, have diversified investments, pay the lowest fees, because you never know what financial markets will do. And there's this phrase I use a lot, long-term financial markets are a weighing machine, but short-term they're a voting machine. And what that means is that short-term they can go up and down on emotion, but long-term, ultimately, if you believe in capitalism, then you'll believe that financial markets will work it out and basically return you what you deserve to get for the risk that you're taking with your investments. Who would have thought that after Donald Trump was elected that we would now be looking at US financial markets that are as the highest that they've ever been? A lot of people would have said there's no way you could do that with tariffs and so on. And so it just confirms that it is a very unpredictable world, and you sometimes don't know what financial markets will do short term. My personal theory is that the financial markets are seeing through what's happening in America. And if you have a look at these big indices globally, they're actually international companies. If you look at the Magnificent Seven, the 7 big tech stocks, they're just not US companies. Yes, they happen to be US taxpayers, but actually they're very global companies. And so really what you're making a bet on there is things like AI, the future of tech. You're not necessarily making a political decision about what's happening in America. But that aside, it's a huge advertisement for diversification, sticking to your long-term plan, because you don't know what financial markets will do. So what I'm going to do now is share a presentation that I've been showing around the country, which is, and I just wanted to make sure, let's push play on that. Just wanted to make sure that, okay, that's up. And it's basically talking about our very bright future. This will take about sort of 20, 25 minutes, and then we can have some questions. So first of all, I just want to go very quickly through the Simplicity story for anyone who might be new and unaware of what we're doing here. The next is about talking about the next 30 years. And I'm posing a question mark, will they be the best 30 years we've ever had? And I wanted to give you a realistic assessment of the present, but also an optimistic sense of the future, and provide some examples of how we think it's going to pan out, and why the next 30 years may be really good. First of all, a Simplicity story is a very simple one in a way. There's a group of people, our founders, that got together on day one around our kitchen table. What we wanted to do was to charge the lowest fees for financial products, but also invest to do good. And so, of course, we set ourselves up, we called ourselves a dignity company. And what that means is we want people to have dignity in life. How you have dignity in life is by having a life with choices. And what you need to do to have choices is to have money. So making people more money gives them more choices in life and gives them dignity in life. So that's what we're all about. And we started off, as many of you will know, we're owned by a charity. We started 8 years ago. We own a non-profit fund manager, and we run KiwiSaver funds, investment funds, and low-cost first home mortgages. And the way we invest that money is to make you money and also do good, and also, obviously charging very, very low fees. We're a default KiwiSaver manager, and because we're owned by a foundation, we're never going to be bought or sold because we're never worth anything. We're a non-profit. So we really have a 100-year view on how we invest. And I think this is one of these things where one of the interesting thing about investing is that time can be your friend. A lot of people assume time is your enemy and that you have to make money quickly, as much money in the shortest period possible time, but that is not true. if time is your friend, you can actually take a very long-term view and you can get the best long-term returns for your members, which is what we're focused on. These numbers are a couple of weeks old now. We've now got over 172,000 members and about $8.4 billion in funds under management. But that gives you some idea that 15% of fees that we've been giving to charities is now almost $11 million. And we're saving, that's the $436 is what you would save if you had $50,000 in a growth fund with our fees versus the industry average fees. But, so far a lot of people would call us a big fund manager in New Zealand. Now I call it a really good start and start of a 100-year journey, 8 years in. So the next 30 years, will they be our best ever? Well, I've got a question mark there, and I'm going to try and almost prove it to you with some numbers, because I firmly believe that. But I just want to take you, first of all, to the challenges, because let's be honest, there are some really dark things out there right now, and there's a lot of bad news. The first big challenge, of course, is that it's tough out there. It's very tough to afford the basics in life. This is produced by Shamabel Jacob, who heads up our research hub, our chief economist. And this shows you how much fewer households can afford to buy the basics in life: fruit, vegetables, meat, over the decades from 1987 until 2023. So there are fewer people that can afford to buy good food. And also, we obviously have a really big housing shortage out there. If you look on the right-hand chart there, the OECD, that grey bar, it shows that just for us to have the average number of houses that there are in the rich countries of the world, we'd have to build another 166,000 houses. And on the left-hand side, you can see where we would need to build them. An awful lot in Auckland, some in Waikato in the Bay of Plenty, and some in Wellington. And there are some other places like Tasman that are short of houses as well. In fact, there's almost nowhere that has enough houses in New Zealand. So we've got to build a lot of houses. There's a housing shortage. The other thing, too, is we have climate realities. As you all know, this is the existential crisis of our generation. We end up having a whole lot of atmospheric CO2, which is causing potentially a whole lot of problems. And we got this guy. They voted him in again, and like him or hate him, one thing you will know that a Trump presidency is going to bring a lot of volatility and a lot of uncertainty. The other interesting thing is a lot of people say, look, New Zealand is very small and very far away. And I just want to challenge both of those assumptions. First of all is, yeah, we are far away. If you drew a 2,000-kilometre ring around New Zealand, it hits almost no land whatsoever. Whereas if you did that around Berlin, you've got the whole of Europe. And you can say, listen, your financial markets are a long way away to export anything. And you can say we're quite small. But except that, for all of those challenges that we have, let's look at these things. First of all, are we actually a big country, a small country? We're actually quite a big country. If you overlaid us on Europe there, we actually stretch from Barcelona up to Edinburgh. Very long country, but we're also actually geographically quite big as well. And the interesting thing, too, is that we're also, and I'm sorry about these slides, they seem to have got rid of the titles, but I'll tell you what they are. We're now an Asia-Pacific country, and this chart shows you from 1950 to 2024 where our export center of gravity goes. So where do our exports go? And as you can see previously, it was nearly all to Europe, and now we're increasingly exporting them to Asia. We're becoming an Asia-Pacific country, which means our export markets are getting much closer. And actually, interestingly, we export a lot more to a lot more countries. So if you look at the chart on the left, in 1874, we were basically just exporting gold and wool. And then if you look over on the right-hand side, by 1872, it was just to Australia and the UK. But now on the right-hand side, back to the left chart on the right-hand side, you can see there's a whole lot of different things we do now. It's not just agriculture, by the way. That other is companies like Rocket Lab. It's like Weta. It's like the software companies. It's our aerospace industry. We actually have a much more diversified set of exports. And on the right-hand column of the right-hand chart, you'll see it's to a whole lot of different markets. So look at the USA, for example. You would think that we would be very vulnerable to tariffs. Well, actually, the USA is not that big a chunk of our export markets. We actually have very diversified exports to a lot of diversified countries. We are way better positioned and carry on getting better positioned over time in terms of the diversity of our exports. And here's the really, really big one. This is the killer, why I think the next 30 years are going to be great, because we are now starting to save and invest. And this is a chart Shamabel did showing the number of households that invest in anything other than the house they live in, right? Who is saving and investing here? Back in 2007, less than 20%, less than 1 in 5 households had savings outside the house that they owned in the mortgage. And now look at 2022, 2023, it's getting up, in fact it is, up around 60%. So more and more of us are saving, and the big thing there is KiwiSaver, right? 3.5 million New Zealanders have KiwiSaver accounts now. A lot of them are saving regularly into that. And what that does is something really significant. And I've talked about this rising tide of savings in New Zealand. KiwiSaver is now growing. It's a $120 billion pool. Depending on the assumptions, I mean, Shamabel can show you how it can be 900 billion by 2050, but easily how it could be in the trillions as well, back into 2060, 2070. Either way, it is a tremendous amount of money. New Zealanders have never saved this much outside of buying investment properties, and a lot of that is getting recycled into our local economy. So we go from being capital starved to capital richer. But the big thing is it's not a tidal wave of money. You don't see it happen all at once. It just gets drip, 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 drip. It comes in at the moment. So, for example, at Simplicity, we get on average millions of dollars a day now from KiwiSaver members and investment fund members who are just putting a little bit in, and it all adds up, which means we are, net investing every single day. So this is actually a very positive story for New Zealand. This is where Australia was in about 1985. And so we're going to start playing catch up, and the higher our KiwiSaver contributions go, the faster we'll catch up. So what does that mean for New Zealand? So let me do this number which really excites me right now. If you look at KiwiSaver managers in New Zealand, they have approximately 30% of their investments in New Zealand. So for every dollar that KiwiSaver members save, about 30 cents gets invested in New Zealand. If you assume that 30% would stay the same, and you said by 2060, how much money, extra money, would KiwiSaver managers have to invest in New Zealand? Okay, how much more could they invest in New Zealand in the businesses or roads or infrastructure or whatever? It's this much. It's over $250 billion. That is an astronomical sum of money. That is actually more than half our GDP in net new investment of New Zealanders' money by KiwiSaver managers into New Zealand. That's if we keep it at 30%. So that is a magnificent opportunity for us to fund our infrastructure needs, and also, the venture capital needs, the private equity needs, and so on. It's a tremendous amount of money. And that means Aotearoa New Zealand will become, in my opinion, a much richer country. In fact, this is what's happened in Australia and all around the world, where people have started saving in their pension and superannuation funds. And it's an awesome opportunity, because what that means is you would assume more jobs, better paid jobs, and just all of the choices and dignity you get as a country when you have more money and more money saved. So let me give you an example, because you can say, Sam, it's all very theoretical. Maybe the managers won't invest in New Zealand. Maybe this is all just, superannuation money, and maybe we won't get jobs and so on. Well, let me give you an example of what one fund manager, that's us, Simplicity, is doing when we realize that we have an increasing amount of money over a very long period of time to invest in New Zealand to make our members' returns, but also do good. So here's an example: Simplicity Living. And many of you would have heard of it. Some of you may not. This is where our KiwiSaver investment funds invest into Simplicity Living, which is a property developer and does long-term build to rent. So we build these homes and we rent them long-term. Simplicity Living is owned by our KiwiSaver and investment funds 100%. Here's what we've done. We started doing this about 4 years ago, and we've already now got over 210 homes built and fully rented. And I think our rental occupancy is well over 99%, because we offer a fair rent, a really high quality new home, and you can rent for the long term. So that's what we've done, 210 homes. But look what we're doing. We've also got now in build in Mount Wellington, 297 homes. That photograph there on the left-hand side is actually a couple of months old now. You wouldn't believe it. It's gone up a lot. And on the right-hand side that's what it will look like when it's finished. And to give you an example of why these are not just pictures, this is the reality. If you look at that brick building on the right-hand side there, the render or the picture, right, the artist's rendition, Well, this is what that building looks like now. So the left-hand side, we've just taken the scaffolding down. So I'll go back again, have a look at what we said it would look like. That's the lower brick building in the middle there. And that's what it actually looks like. So, one of the reasons I think why we have a good relationship with the council in terms of getting builder consents is they know that the reality of it will actually look like the picture. So we're starting to do that. And that's just one. Here's the second one we're doing right now. We've got this in build in Waitarua. You'll start to see this from the Southern Motorway if you're in Auckland. And that's now going to be 330 homes, which we target to open by May 2027. Even since we took this picture, we've already got buildings now coming out of the ground. It's going incredibly well. And this month, we start building in Morningside, 262 homes. Construction starts this month, and so we'll have 3 big sites going. And to give you an example of what we've done, and this is just one KiwiSaver manager looking at that money that's coming in and wanting to invest for the long term, there we have 210 homes built and rented, 627 in build, 262 in development. That's at Morningside, which is about to start this month. So we'll actually have 889 homes in build by the end of this month. And then we've got 90 in the consent process. We'll have some good news for you in a week or two. We've just received our resource consent to build another 90 homes somewhere in Auckland that we'll tell you about. So, we've got a long-term target of building and renting 10,000 homes, and we now have 1,189 in train, either built or in build. So we're getting on with it. And that's just one example of what a KiwiSaver manager can do who decides to commit to something long-term and takes advantage of all that money that is arriving over the long term. And to give you an example of our impact, so these are the things that we do, which are not, 93% of our money is invested in indices, low-cost indexes all around the world, including in New Zealand, where we focus on low cost. But every now and again, we will find an area where having a lot of money that you can invest over long term and being a New Zealand-owned business owned by a charity gives us a competitive advantage. So those long-term build-to-rent homes is an example of that, and we've invested $254 million as of today in that. We also do low-cost first home mortgages. We've done 421 of those. I think we have about 427 now, homes under mortgage. That is providing a lower cost floating rate mortgage for our borrowers, but also a fair return for our members too, because we're not making a profit like the banks do out of mortgage. We put 217 million into that. We've helped fund via community finance 165 homes by effectively providing $43 million of debt funding for community housing providers. We're invested via Icehouse Ventures. We have a stake in the company, but also we invest in their funds, $30 million we put in, which has helped fund 72 startups. And private equity, these are privately owned companies that we've made long-term investments in, which is going well, $42 million there. So simplicity, we've been around for 8 years. We've put $586 million we have invested right now out of $8.4 billion. So it's less than 7% of our money, but it adds up to being a lot of money, and it adds up to making a difference. And so we think if more KiwiSaver managers do this, and if we ended up, as we grow, investing even just the same proportion into this, it starts to make a significant difference, because all of these things are providing jobs. Let me give you an example of simplicity living. We're actually going to add up how many jobs we are directly, roles we're directly paying, but also all of the subcontractors who are providing, and labourers and all that sort of thing. We think that in fact, we know we are employing effectively, directly or indirectly, hundreds and hundreds of people on our building site. And this is when the construction industry is going through a downturn. And so that means that we're able to build through the cycle, keep people employed, give them long-term security of income, which is exactly what KiwiSaver, should be doing. It should be helping smooth out the economy. In fact, you see that in Australia, where in the last 30 years, Australia's only had one recession for 1 year. And our theory there is the superannuation money has actually been funding building and growth and businesses in Australia to help smooth out the economic cycle. Australia has 5 times our population. They have 30 times our retirement savings. And having all of that money just buys you a lot of options in life. So, will the next 30 years be our best ever? Well, I think yes, because I think as a country we will have more money, and therefore we will use that money to provide ourselves with more choices. of jobs, more choices of places to live, more choices of home financing, more choices of, money for private equity and venture capital can do. And with those choices, of course, comes dignity at a national level as well as an individual level. As you, as the saver, having more money gives you choices and dignity, but also as a country, when you add up all of those savings, it gives us choices and dignity as well. So very optimistic about the future. It will not be smooth sailing. There will be ups and downs. Things will go wrong from time to time. The financial markets will puke as they do, every few years, it seems. But the most important thing is you can't predict it. You don't know what direction it's going in. So choose the right fund for you. Stick with your long-term plan. And as long as you are in an appropriately diversified set of investments and obviously paying the lowest possible fee, you have, time is your friend. The financial markets that are the weighing machine will weigh in your favor. So I'm going to click out of that presentation now. I've got to do this thing called stop share. There we go. And there's me there. So there's already some questions coming through, and I'm just going to take as many questions as you want, folks. So let me just start here. So from Ian, we are a late starting family from a home ownership point of view. The bulk of our income is going into servicing the mortgage. I did some paper napkin rump numbers, and I'm wondering if we should be better getting a return if we rented and invested approximately 50% of what we've been paying in mortgages and switch that to a KiwiSaver investment fund. Well, obviously, I can't give you personal advice, Ian, but I would say this about the property market. For the longest period of time, New Zealanders have very sensibly put a lot of money into their property because it's been tax-free capital gains. And the gains have kept on coming, right? So as houses have become more expensive, they become less affordable. But if you happen to own one, you've actually done well. And a whole generation of people, my generation, have done incredibly well out of buying property. The problem with that, and there is just one problem, is you're always assuming that it goes up. So that you will get that tax-free capital gain. What would happen if property just flatlined? Well, in some cases, like yours, as you're intimating, you might be paying a lot on the mortgage to actually get no tax-free capital gain, whereas an alternative may have been, renting for you and investing the money elsewhere. I think one of the problems with New Zealand is there haven't been reliable long-term rentals. So you haven't really been able to have a reliable quality of life as much as you might by choosing to rent and then invest the money. That is much more common overseas. If you're in Europe or the United States, home ownership rates are actually, in many cases, lower than they are here because people do choose that option. They can do a long-term rent, they can fix the rent, it's inflation adjusted, and then they can invest in other things, including in their own businesses, by the way. You might want to start up a business to do that. So I can't give you personal advice on this end, but I can say that I think the options available to you now with people like us building long-term rental housing and other people hopefully will follow, and the fact that there might not be this guaranteed hardwired capital appreciation in houses, you've seen the market dip down over the last couple of years, that might start to influence people's opinions like yourselves. One question from Lucia. This is Brendan, who asked on Facebook, what do the politicians say when you ask them to make KiwiSaver compulsory? Well, it's hard to generalize for all politicians, but I would say this. They don't say no. They don't think it's an if, will it become compulsory? It's just when it will become compulsory. And there are different levels of objection. So some politicians say, listen, why would you make it compulsory when we have national super? Because you have income security via national super. If people want to save extra, they should be allowed to, but they shouldn't be forced to do it. The contrary argument to that is national super is just going to be unaffordable over time. Back when national super was put in, 8 people were earning money and paying taxes and had jobs for every one on national super. At the moment, 4 people are currently earning to support everyone on national super. By 2050, it might be a little bit later than that. No, I think about 2080, 2 people will be supporting everyone on national super. Our theory is that it will be unaffordable. It is inevitable that either national super payments come down for everybody or they start means testing it in some form, in which case you would be very wise to have another pool of savings which gives you choices. So that's one objection. The other objection is that it's just too difficult to make it compulsory right now, in the sense that there'll be no votes forcing people to save who don't feel as if they can afford to save right now. Our view on it is it's just going to have to happen. And the reason I get annoyed with politicians when I get particularly that second argument is that actually what's happening now is I think KiwiSaver is threatening to exacerbate the inequality of wealth in New Zealand, because the people who most need it are the people who are not saving enough. It is the poorer people who feel as if they need a dollar in their pocket now rather than actually saving for their future. And unfortunately, unless someone is saving for them, unless they are making some other way, or unless National Super becomes means tested so they are always looked after, they are going to suffer later on in life because they won't have the money and the choices and the dignity that the rest of us do. A question from Viv: what do you think will be the effect of AI on our investments? Well, that's a really interesting question. I think on investments generally it will be positive, because I think most business models will embrace AI and it will become more efficient. I think for some businesses it will be very threatening. The finance industry is a classic example of this. The finance industry has a lot of advertising and what I would call a lot of trading on apathy and ignorance. It's just assuming that people won't change their minds. That's why so much money is in zero earning bank accounts, for example. But AI is actually going to cut through that advertising, cut through those models, and actually, of its own volition, recommend things which might actually be better for you. So I think it'll be quite disruptive for some industries, but I don't think it's necessarily bad for investments. AI is just another efficiency tool. If you think about AI like a machine, like a production line, like a robot, like, I don't know, the wheel. It's a technological invention that actually allows more to be produced and more to be done for the same unit of input. So quite good for investments, I think, long term. I'm not so sure about what it will mean for some industries. And I got another question from Heather as well. How do you see AI impacting the economy? Look, I'm 60 years old. I have seen these technologies come in and everyone's thought it was doom and gloom. I remember when the spreadsheet came in and they said, oh, no accountant will have a job anymore. Well, there are more accountants now than there were then, even though that they have these tools. So when you take professions and you empower them with tools, actually what happens is you get more productivity, you get more stuff coming out. And it's that stuff that comes out, whether it's services or products or whatever, that actually employs people. And so I'm not nearly as negative as other people are about AI. A lot of people doom and gloom how to make all these jobs redundant. I've kind of heard that before. What I think it is a massively powerful tool. It will certainly disrupt some jobs. I don't think you want to be in a low added value profession, but some of them it will hardly touch. I mean, I can't see AI really impacting plumbers for a long time, for example. From Alex: is it smarter to buy your first home or just keep saving in KiwiSaver until retirement? Hard to know, Alex. I can't give you personal financial advice there. I can say that that's been a winning strategy for a long time in New Zealand. Buy your first home, take out the biggest mortgage you can, pay it off, because you get tax-free capital gain. If you believe that the value of houses keep on going up, that might be a sensible strategy. If you believe that houses are going to flatline and you won't get that tax-free capital gain and you don't mind renting, you might actually prefer to do that. Bearing in mind, of course, that there's a whole generation now that are used to more mobility. Older generations were used to being in one place at one time because that's where their job was, that's where their family was. But now people are, you get gig economy workers, you get, I talk to my kids, once a week across the other side of the world on video. Everyone feels a lot closer, so there's a lot more mobility, and home ownership tends to be a little bit of a drag on mobility if you want that. So from an investment point of view, I think it's a line ball. Call what you would do there. It depends on your personal circumstances. In terms of how the world is moving and how New Zealand is moving, I think we will get more people renting when renting becomes more reliable. And then this is Banksy from YouTube. Sam, do you believe renting is the future, not just because many can't afford to own, but also the increasing opinion of being able to build wealth without home ownership? I guess the same sort of question there as well. I think it's becoming a much more realistic option now for people. A lot of people were talked out of it, didn't think that it was a reliable way to build wealth, but it is now becoming another option. Dean, how have the returns on the home and income been, Sam? Assume there's a natural lag between build and renting. The home and income fund's got about 25% of its money, from memory, in Simplicity Living. It also invests in home mortgages. It invests in community housing bonds, and then also has a very large cash component there as well. So the returns have been reliable, but I think it's around about, from memory, around about 5% per annum. It is a very diversified portfolio. It's obviously property focused there as well. So it's performing exactly as we expected. As we get more and more development going on in Simplicity Living, I would expect to see those returns go up a little bit as a consequence of that. And also we need to have a talk to our supervisor about getting the amount of cash down in that, because when we started out, we had a very conservative approach, in our opinion anyway, in terms of how much cash, just to make sure we saw how many people wanted to put their money in, but most importantly, how many wanted to take it out. And I don't think we've had very much turnover there. So we should start talking about getting it more invested. Alex, is it advisable to set up a KiwiSaver for a child, or just keep investing in your own KiwiSaver? Well, that's an interesting question, Alex. I mean, the purpose of having it for your child is really because you want them to have their own designated pool of money that they carry through their life that no one else can touch, that's available for them to buy their first home. It's available in hardship and obviously for their retirement. If you have it as part of you saving, I guess you can carry on saving, and then it becomes part of your estate. So if you want to later on access your KiwiSaver money, then you can give it to your child in retirement, or obviously they would benefit if you're in hardship. So it's a very sort of personal circumstances there. The reason I like it, I set up my kids very early in KiwiSaver, and I've just been saving a little bit each week. The reason I like that is because you get the power of compounding interest working for you, but equally it would be working if it was in your KiwiSaver there as well. But as a general rule, I think it's kind of cool that a kid can look at an account which is theirs in their name. It's their KiwiSaver. You get them used to saving. You get them used to seeing what the impact of compounding returns is. And Anonymous, what do you think of the recent changes to KiwiSaver announcement in the government's budget? For example, the extension for young people. Look, I think it was one step back and two steps forward. What's happened with KiwiSaver is national-led governments have typically sort of dismantled them. Like, they've thought that KiwiSaver was a Labour Party thing, and enough people were in it that they couldn't get rid of it, like Rob Muldoon did back in the 70s. But equally, they've chipped away. They got rid of the $1,000 kickstart. They got rid of higher member tax credits and so on. But what I noticed in this budget is a lot of people looked at the halving of the member tax credit. They said, Nicola Willis is taking away money now. But actually, I think what they didn't quite notice was, yes, they were making it available for younger people. That is good. And B, also increasing it from 3 to 4% over time was also good as well. It was the first example I saw of national-led governments actually expanding KiwiSaver. So they were taking with one hand, but they were giving with another. And so I think that was actually a positive thing for KiwiSaver. Ultimately, people will save more money, but it is only one step on the journey. The real journey is we've got to get our contributions close to Aussie, up over time, up to around that 10, 12% mark, and we have to make it compulsory. I personally think KiwiSaver should be compulsory from birth. I think when you're born, you should get an IID number, which opens an access to a whole lot of services that some kids, like foster kids, struggle to get. And it also, you should have KiwiSaver so you get that compounding interest. I would actually I'd like to take that member tax, make it compulsory for everybody, take that member tax credit back from the adults and give it to the kids in terms of an amount that goes into their KiwiSaver account every week, so the kids can see the money building up. And I think we did some calculations there that would be pretty easy to take those subsidies and have every child in New Zealand having something around about $20,000 by the time they were 20 in their own KiwiSaver account. That is money and choices and dignity. From SFOC, will Simplicity consider investing in a New Zealand startup, clean energy, fusion nucleus? It was featured in 3 News a couple of weeks ago. Well, we won't, but we do fund Icehouse Ventures, and it's their job to have a look at those new startups. I think we have 72 startups that we funded via Icehouse Ventures through their decisions. So that would be an Icehouse Ventures call, but sounds very interesting. From Anonymous, how is our investment in Simplicity Living valued? I can see approximately 4% of my KiwiSavers in living, plus another 2.4% in mortgages. Specifically, is the living amount valued at cost, or is there any gain attributed to the investment in the building phase? Yeah, so here's how we value Simplicity Living. So every dollar that goes into the construction of that, we accrue a 20% return on that, because what happens is we obviously build and then the buildings get revalued at market. And our best, and this is, we've obviously discussed this with our supervisors and auditors and so on, is that we think that we should be accruing that at about 20% per annum development gains as we go through the construction phase. We then get it valued at the end with an independent valuer, and then regularly valued after that. So that's how the valuation goes on. It's all arm's length. It's all audited. It's all, independent valuers. It's a very, very thorough process signed off by our supervisor and our auditors. From Kay, are you considering opening a bank or buying shares in KiwiBank if the government partially privatizes? Open-minded on that, Kay. You have to the proof will be in the pudding. Let's see what they offer. I've said publicly that in theory we'd like to own a chunk of KiwiBank, because we think KiwiBank should be recapitalised so that it can compete more effectively with the Australian banks. Whether or not that is us investing in it depends very much on nature of the deal, how much it's priced, so on and so forth. So too early to say yet. From an anonymous, do you have any concerns about the bond markets? The Yanks are about to blow their budget by trillions of dollars with Trump's big, beautiful bill. Well, we don't have any, let's call it short to medium concerns about the US defaulting, because they are what they call the fiat currency. So they borrow in US dollars, which means they can just print more US dollars to repay. But that doesn't mean that it's not risky, because the lower and lower the confidence that people have in the ability of the US government to repay its debt, the higher and higher the interest rates go for people to have to be compensated for that risk. So it is possible that bond markets could actually go down in value because interest rates go up, and the US government has to pay more to borrow money. So bond markets are at risk by unfettered borrowing. I'm personally hugely negative on this big, beautiful bill. I think it is an example of taking from the poor and giving to the rich. It's like Robin Hood in reverse. It is very much seems to be in sync with the philosophy of Margaret and Trump. But is it good for America? My personal view is no. Will it impact the bond markets? Potentially, but let's wait and see. Anonymous attendee, any plans to build to rent in Wellington? Well, we've been down and had a really good look, and we've really struggled to find anything that is financially feasible. The problem with Wellington is a couple of things. First of all, is the rents are high, but they're not at a level where it compensates for the extra cost of building in Wellington. In Wellington, there are infrastructure problems, getting access to water, getting access to proper sewage systems. There's earthquake risk. It's a highly constrained site, so there's a lot of sites on hills. It is difficult to build in Wellington. It's difficult to build economically. So we've had one good look at it. We couldn't find anything. We'll obviously keep our eyes open, because it would be awesome to have build to rent in Wellington, but it has to be the right site at the right price with the right infrastructure, with the right ability to rent. And at the moment, we haven't been able to make those ducks line up, whereas we have in Auckland, and there's one other city where we're doing some serious due diligence on, where we may have some announcements in the next few months. From Dean, would Simplicity consider opening on-call savings accounts for members? Seems you hold significant cash on call. Well, we sort of have that with our cash fund, Dean. You can get your money in and out, but it's not on call in the sense that it's paid that day. You have to wait. You get the value of it that day, but you have to wait a couple of days for it to appear in your bank account. So we sort of have that at the moment, but we don't have a bank account. We would have to wait until, or an on-call fund account with a debit card. But what we're going to do is just wait and see what happens with open banking, because if open banking comes in at the end of this year, that might be considerably easier, in which case we'll revisit that. From Alex, if you had your say and KiwiSaver was compulsory, what would you like to see the employer-employee contribution rates, and how quickly would you increase it to that rate? Yeah, it's a great question, Alex. I personally would like to see all KiwiSaver contributions paid for by the employer. Because I think that it should form part of your compensation package, but that the employer should have to pay it. So I think you should stop the employee contributions, put it onto the employer, but only increase it by 0.5% per annum. So right now, what I would do is if you're on, say a 3 and 3, so employer 3, you 3, I would actually say, if I was the government right now, I'd say, listen, you don't have to pay the 3%. But the employer has to increase their contributions by 0.5%. That would actually take 5 or 6 years to catch up, but it would be a much simpler one. And then I'd like to take it up to what the Australians do, which is up around 12%. But that would take about 20 to 25 years because you'd have to build it into pay negotiations. It has to be affordable for employers to be able to do that. And if it's a 0.5% extra cost per annum, they can build that into how much an employee costs them. And that just keeps it then very simple. That means when you're working, you are saving for your retirement. If you're not working, you're not saving for your retirement. That seems fair to me. It also is administratively very simple, and it also makes people understand that if they have a job, KiwiSaver is part of it, and the employer has to pay this amount. This is what's worked in Australia massively successfully. It's worked around other countries as well. So I think this blended model we have is not ideal. I'd move it all onto the employer. I think that we are about finished. I'll just see if there's one more question. No, I think we've just about finished with questions. So I'm just going to let anyone, while I'm just talking in the next 15 or 20 seconds, if someone else wants to pop a question up there, very happy to answer it. You answer about, the economy, there's anything you want. As you know, I have plenty of opinions on a whole lot of topics. So if anyone else wants to have a quick question, just pop it up there right now. And otherwise, I think we're just about done. It was 41 minutes. That's pretty quick, isn't it? Here we go. From Vincent. Have you invested in shared equity homes and how does it work? No, we haven't invested in shared equity homes, Vincent. We would always want our members' money to own and control 100% of the investments that we made if it's in housing. So, we don't have any, JVs or shared equity in Simplicity Living. There are lots of different shared equity schemes. You'd have to have a look at the particular ones. Some of them want to take a percentage in the house. Some of them are paying rent, which then turns into a share in the house. Some of them have many different owners of the house. Some of them only have a couple. So it's very hard for me to describe it generally, but other than the very high level, it's taking the value of a house and slicing it up between many different owners. And so you all participate in the rising value of the house if it does rise. But then you have, issues about who can sell to who, how you get out of it, and so on. Got a question, Nav, from YouTube. Job market predictions. It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. So everyone's very spooked by AI in terms of its impact on the job market here. And there's no doubt that we're seeing the first, what I call the easy wave of redundancies from AI. There are some jobs which are just more vulnerable to technological innovation like AI. But I don't expect to see that increasing, because I think that you get the early wins from new technology like AI pretty easily. And it's pretty obvious that you can make some jobs redundant pretty quickly. But then people start using it, and they start using it and realizing that they can make themselves more productive as a consequence. And that what that means is the impact on the job market is not necessarily laying people off. It's just employing less people in certain areas that used to employ more, but then AI opens up the opportunity for more jobs, and because more people get productive in different industries. So it's highly unpredictable, but I don't see any particular difference between this technology and any other revolutionary technology like, I don't know, the computer chip, the spreadsheet, the smartphone. All of these things were, everyone was predicting the end for certain professions, and in some cases that happened, right? The advent of the car meant that people that were making buggy whips generally went out of jobs, but a whole lot more people got employed by the car industry because there was a whole lot of new productivity going on. So I expect AI will generate more jobs over a longer period of time, but there will be a significant period of short-term disruption and fear. From Dean, would you consider expanding Simplicity Living with similar-minded developers, i.e. builders like Ockham? No, Dean, I think we would always want to have complete control over what we do there. We generally find with joint ventures and partnerships that 1 + 1 = 1.5, that actually you just get a lot of meetings and a lot of palaver and don't necessarily get the advantages. There are some circumstances where joint ventures work, but relatively few. So we have a very simple philosophy at Simplicity. We're going to be around longer than most of our potential partners will be because we're a non-profit owned by a charity. We have a 100-year view. We think most joint venture partners typically have a pretty short-term view. So we would rather wait and do it ourselves. And then another one now from YouTube, Simplicity Living Plans in Hamilton, Tauranga, South Island. We are looking at all of them and have looked at all of them. So we don't have any hard and fast plans to build anything anywhere. We may have an announcement in one of those areas in the next couple of months because something is looking more likely rather than less. But we're just going to keep on looking. Where the economics stack up, it works. Donna, will you have a phone-based call centre as suggested in the New Zealand Herald? Well, we do now have a number that you can call, and we are staffing that. And if we don't get through to the live person, it goes into effectively our call centre is notified and they will call you back. So we do basically have a phone-based call centre now, Donna. What we don't have is an army of people sitting there waiting to call and keeping you in a queue with music. When we're busy, we would much rather just you left a message and then we'll call you back. So we're getting better and better on this. Anonymous attendee, can you share any goals Simplicity has for the year? You've lowered fees before and cut the minimum deposit levels, etc. Oh, well, we have a whole lot of goals. And I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag on any of them, actually. But suffice it to say that we're looking at some areas where we think New Zealanders are paying too much for financial services, some other areas, and we're having a good look at whether we could come up with a very disruptive model. One area, and that might be, for example, insurance would be a classic example. So we'll having a look at that. We're also having a look at how we might better manage our unlisted assets as well. Maybe we'll put a little bit more money into that. We continue to look at Simplicity Living, continue to look at mortgages. How can we expand those programs there? And what else are we looking at? Oh, yeah, we're having a pretty serious look at infrastructure, how we can invest there. And yes, we are looking at our fees again. So hopefully we'll have some good news for you there. But, it's a sort of a wait and see on that. But we are bursting with ideas at the moment. And we just really think that we've just sort of established a level of credibility and scale in the market now that allows us to start thinking about doing different things. And that's what we're going to do. So, folks, I think we've finished all the questions. Thank you for that last burst. And let me just make sure. Oh, did we have one more there that just sneaked in there? Martin, reference your call center question. I've had a great response to a couple of queries made over email over the last year or two. Yep, I just totally love our member services team. They are rock stars. And I'm looking at them right now and big smiles. Yeah, we have a lot of happy customers. I think one of the reasons why we win these consumer awards and these CanStars awards year after year after year is because of the fabulous job that our member services team does in looking after. So thank you very much for the lovely feedback, Martin. That's really appreciated. So, folks, I think we've just about finished now. So thank you very much. It was relatively short and sweet. If you have any questions, my email is sam.stubbs@simplicity.kiwi. So always happy to chat there as well. And my team, they tell me don't ever do this, but I'm going to do it. I always do it. My phone number is 021-491-547. So if you want to give me a call, give me a call. Probably better on email or via text, but because I'm in a lot of meetings, but very, very happy to chat about anything that you want to. So thanks very much.